Hello, everybody. It's Thursday night. We're live on the Smart Connector group, and I have the most phenomenal guest tonight, all the way from LA, Ryan Foland. Great to have you here, Ryan.
It's great to be here with you in the UK. I mean, I might physically be here in Long Beach, California, but mentally and physically and spiritually, I'm right there. I'm with you.
And we were chatting earlier. Of course, you have fond memories of the UK, don't you, Ryan?
Yes, I went to uni at the University of Reading, actually.
Yeah. And what brought you to the UK? Because we don't get many American students over here. Do you have family ties?
No, actually, at the time, I was dating a Brazilian, a friend, at the time, a girlfriend in Santa Barbara, where I was going to school, and she was going to study abroad in Brazil. And I was, jealous. And so she said, well, how about you go study somewhere? And at the time, I was studying business economics and theater. And so I thought to myself, well, let's go check out where Shakespeare is from. Let's figure that out. And so I chased down the University of Reading, and I was there for an entire semester, studied both economics and dramatic art. Went to the Globe and had an epiphany in a moment. I'm like, this is what I'm meant to do, is just sort of be the modern version of a playwright and sort of share my message with the world. When I went back to college, I found out that the relationship didn't work. So we went far and came back and broke up. But
Oh,
I had a great experience. And then that was the beginning of an entire month journey from Amsterdam down to Rome and then to Scotland and Ireland, and your classic backpacking adventure, which now that I talk about it, I'm like longing for those days. I need to get back there.
oh, I know. It just seems like freedom, doesn't it? The opportunity to travel around and just visit all those places without a care in the world. It seems a bit like a long time ago, doesn't it?
Yes, and it unfortunately seems like it might be a while until that happens again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ryan, tell our viewers and our listeners tonight all about yourself. You're a brand consultant and you've written an absolutely awesome book. I've got it here, and it's
Yeah.
called Ditch the Act. And it's all about the power of vulnerable, isn't it, Ryan?
Yes. It's about how to get ahead in business today, and that's
Mm.
by being human. I think that we're all a bit over the oversized egos and Instagram personalities that we think are getting the traction because they might be getting the likes. But really, the core message of the book is that when you are sharing more than just the good, it gives a chance for people not to necessarily just focus on your story of success, but actually an ability to see how they see themselves in your story. And that means letting people actually get to know you, like your friends and family know you, with the good, the bad, and your version of ugly. And let's face it, we all have our versions of ugly.
We certainly do. We certainly do. But the interesting thing in your what you're talking about, Ryan, is that of course you are now here live in the UK. We are the land of stiff upper lip. You see, we don't really do vulnerable here. You know, we're like Winston Churchill. When you're going through tough times, keep going.
Right.
Um, when you're going through hell, he said, keep going.
Yeah.
That's stiff upper lip. So vulnerable is a scary notion to us Brits.
Okay,
Let's
and when you are scared of something, it means that you're going in the right direction. And so I think there's more opportunity than you would think, because let's say culturally in the US, there is a culture of authenticity, and our upper lifts are not as stiff. They're still It's still not completely widespread. It's not across the board, but because there is so much opportunity where you're at, you could be vulnerable just a little bit, and it would be you'll see way more compounding results than if you stick with the upper lip being stiff.
Well, I think that I'm actually, should we say, a little bit unusual because I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve quite a bit. So I tend to go out there on social media relatively fearlessly. And I will say things that other people are like, oh my God, Jane, why did you say that? And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Does it really matter? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? you know, if you get bad responses to your post and they start to spoil your day, you can just delete it.
Yeah, and that's a choice that you have of how
Hmm.
their comments impact you. But I would bet for every trolley comment, there's somebody, whether they post or not, that is really excited that you were relatively fearless enough to say what they might have been thinking. One
Yeah.
of the concepts in the book that is a good place to start is going first. So let's say somebody asks you, "Oh, cheerio, how's your Thursday going?" And it's maybe really, really wasn't a good day. Like genuinely, like things fell apart. You spilled stuff. Your coffee kept getting cold, and then you microwaved it, and then you kept forgetting about it. Like life happened today. And if you take the initiative and are slightly fearless enough to actually be honest about your day, as in
Hmm.
sharing like what didn't go right, you will see that it gives permission for somebody else to go second and be like, well, yeah, I didn't get that good of sleep either last night, or that also is it. And now you're like commiserating in that, and you're actually connecting in that.
Yeah, and I personally love it when other people are very open and very much themselves, and they share a bit of the ups and downs in their lives on social media. I think it's so relatable, really, isn't it? Because we we don't really bond with people who are just that they just don't reveal anything about themselves, do we? I mean, they're just like, I don't have a feeling for this person. You got to have a feeling for somebody if you don't know them actually in real life. It's the only way to really cut through, isn't it? I think so anyway.
I completely agree. And if you don't get deeper than surface level, then you're really not setting the foundation for long-term trust or loyalty. And we all
Mhm.
have friends that are friends that we know in our life, but for one reason or another, the conversations don't go that deep. They don't necessarily call you when things go wrong. You don't really know what's going on, and when you catch up, it's just like, oh yeah, things are okay. It's been a while. Like there's not that connection, but the
Yeah.
friends that you are comfortable sharing your ups and downs with, those are the people you call. Those are the people that you have those real, tangible relationships with.
Yes, that's right. So I just wanted to say, because we are live, Ryan, so I just wanted to say for the people that are listening in, I know that there are going to be some comments coming through. So if you can just identify yourselves by name so that we can answer you by name, because it's a little bit hard to differentiate you otherwise, because it just comes through on as Facebook user on the feed. So just thought I'd mention that. So we'll look forward to having your hearing your questions. Right. So Ryan, let's just talk about the commercial impact then of becoming vulnerable, because you work with all sorts of people, don't you? Work with organizations, so you help employees become more vulnerable as well in the context of their employment. It's not just entrepreneurs, is it? So
Right.
why do businesses want their employees to become vulnerable?
Well, let's start at the very beginning of the employee cycle, which is how you get hired for a job. And I think this is on point now because there are people who've been furloughed, there's people who their job just doesn't exist anymore, and people who have, been 20, 30 years into an industry, and now they're having to sit in that interview spot. If you've ever run interviews, and I've run tons of interviews, I've hired a lot of people, there's certain things that you want to accomplish in an interview. And I would say the number one is you actually want to get a sense of who this person really is,
Mm,
because you're looking at a resume, and every single thing that is on this resume, is highlighted and plucked from a whole vat of experiences.
mhm,
They're obviously going to come dressed as best as they can. They obviously are going to be on their P's and Q's. But sometimes if you're too much on those P's and Q's, it comes across a bit inauthentic. And if I ask you a question about, say, your leadership skill, and you give me a very canned answer of what you think I want to hear, you don't differentiate. You don't stand out. There's nothing that makes me go, oh my gosh, I want to get to know this person more.
mm,
So I have a trick for people who are interviewing, and this gets to the heart of why it's so important to be vulnerable as an employee, as a manager, as a leader, as a CEO. If somebody says, explain to me your thought process on blank. So, how are you as a leader? How do you work with teams? Fill in the blank. I challenge you, instead of coming up with a canned answer, to say this. Well, let me first tell you a story about when things didn't go so right. And you flash back to a story in time when you were not a good leader, when you fell as a leader, when you got run over as a leader, when you had an opportunity to lead, but you didn't because you were fearful. You really tell a story. And to tell a story, it's who, what, when, where, why,
Mhm.
and what that incident was, right? So now you've set this tone. An important part of storytelling is that it gets past the rudimentary croc brain. So every boss is going to be looking for instant evolutionary signals that you're not a good fit. And in order
Mhm.
for them to use their prefrontal cortex to actually use higher level thinking to figure out if, get past that croc brain, telling a story will diffuse it. And all of a sudden you're human. Now, in that story, you explain what went wrong, but more importantly, what you've learned and how you have changed as a person or a leader or a team leader as a result. And the reason
Mhm.
why this is important is because nobody wants to be the testing ground for failure.
Mhm.
But if you can show that you have experience where you've already made mistakes, it's made you realize what you've learned, and that is truly your experience is what creates your expertise, then you're
Mhm.
showing resilience. You're showing critical thinking. You're showing coachability. You're showing all these things that as an employer you want to have, but it takes somebody in that interview seat to be a bit vulnerable to share these things. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that's so cool. And I totally resonate with what you're saying, Ryan. I mean, that's obviously one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show, because I just love this topic and I find it so fascinating. And I just agree with everything that you've said. So most of our audience on the group are entrepreneurs. So how do you use vulnerability in the context of entrepreneurship and client acquisition, for example? Because I think a lot of people feel nervous and they feel as though they can't risk being vulnerable and talking about their mistakes because they think they're going to be judged, and I think that's why people don't do it. So what would you say to those people that are thinking, oh, I wouldn't talk about my mistakes? I no, I definitely try and hide them.
Yes. Welcome to the world of entrepreneurship, right? It's because there's this cultural reality around faking it till you make it, right?
Mhm.
Bootstrap your way up, just act as if and just, like go 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 until it actually happens. Now, from an inspiration and motivational side of things, sure, you want to aspire to be that entrepreneur that you want to be. But your expertise is rooted in your experience. And
Mhm.
more so than ever right now, people don't necessarily want to do business with businesses. They want to do business with people. And
Yeah.
in particular, when you're looking at an early stage or even mid stage entrepreneur that's either raising seed funding or going for a B or C, or you're already established and you're looking to grow your business,
Mhm.
if you ask 100 investors and you ask the investors, Mr. Mrs. Investor, do you invest in the jockey or the horse? The jockey being the actual entrepreneur, the horse being whatever startup or whatever big idea that you have that you're riding in on. I would argue that 99.9% of these 100 investors, time and time again, are going to say, I am investing in the jockey, because
Mhm.
they know that the startup idea could be undercut or could be, wish-washed or could be pivoted or could be something like that. I think as entrepreneurs, we feel like the idea is what's important, but an
Mhm.
investor is going to be looking into your eyes, trying to figure out who you are. Are
Mhm.
you the person who is going to take this idea or another idea and run
Mhm.
with it no matter what? So if
Yeah.
you're not selling yourself as a person and you're just focused on the company, you're not as valuable to an investor and you're not as relatable to a customer.
Mm.
You said people feel like they're going to be judged. And
Yes.
that is our instinctual feeling. So there's an
Mhm.
exercise in the book called the exposure resume. And it's a very interesting concept because we talked about the resume. This is the exact opposite. This is everything that you keep from your resume. And the idea is, what are these experiences that you haven't told anybody because you're hiding?
Mhm.
What have you learned? How have you changed? And if you told that to somebody, how would they react? Now,
Mhm.
initially, we just think that they're going to judge us. But when we actually think through what would happen, usually there's a bit of empathy. Usually
Mhm.
there's a bit of compassion. Usually
Yes.
there's a bit of respect. Usually there's all of these things that when somebody comes to you with something in a private setting and it's just you two, it's like, oh my gosh, like I connect with you.
Mm.
Now, I'm not saying you should go out there and just post all of your failures. And that's what we talk about in the book, that you can do it in baby steps.
Mhm.
As an entrepreneur, I'm not saying you have to go and start off talking about all the failures that you've had, but if you forget your coffee in the microwave and you find it at the end of the day, you are like many of us who
Mm.
don't drink their coffee fast enough, warm it up and forget about it. And that is also being vulnerable. So it
Yes.
doesn't have to start at this massive, I'm just going to break down and emotionally vomit on everyone about everything that's gone wrong. No, you start with baby steps, and that allows people to get to know you. And as an entrepreneur, if you let your customers know who you are, they have a choice of whether or not they want to like you. Not the
Mhm.
superficial like on social media, but actually genuinely like you. And if they like you, they might trust you. And if they trust you, that's where loyalty comes. So
You're
if you are
right.
not being vulnerable, even in baby steps, you're missing
Yes.
out.
Yes. I totally agree. That is just so interesting, Ryan. I love it. So vulnerability, it's always an interesting topic, but do you think that it's important to marry vulnerability with your story of success? So, because life is ups and downs, every
Sure.
day is ups and downs, and that is real life, isn't it? And I remember seeing a little Jay Shetty video, and he said, you know, death is like that. Death is the same. Life is ups and downs and ups and downs. So, should you, if you're portraying yourself, for example, on social media or to a client or whatever, should you give them the ups and the downs and the lessons and mix it all up so that you're creating variety? Is that the way to do it, or is there a smarter way? Or a formula that you could perhaps share with us?
Yeah, the formula is a mixture. And the
Mhm.
reason why you don't only want to share successes or you don't only want to share failures is the
Mhm.
same reason why the little boy kept crying wolf.
Mm.
If you are every single day talking about failure after failure after failure after failure after failure, like you become tone deaf to that empathy. You
Yeah.
actually become like a drag, and you sort of suck the energy out of people. On the flip side, if all you do is talk about business, 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 people are
Mhm.
not going to want to connect with you. They're going to mute your profile. They're going to unsubscribe from your newsletter. And there's a lot
Yes,
of people that just hit you with business over the head.
they do.
So the trick is to find your own ratio. That's
Yes.
a ratio between personal things, doesn't
Yes.
necessarily have to be bad. It's just personal things,
Mhm.
and then business things. It's
Yes.
the balance between the two. Now, I've always had a harder time with the personal things and an easier time with the business things. But
I
like if
think
I
most
post, I think most people are, right? It's easier. Like, hey, here's a
yeah,
podcast. Hey, here's this. But like those podcast posts, when I'm tweeting them out, it's not like everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is so great. It's just it's another piece of content for them. But if I share that how frustrated I am about something going on in my life, or if I indicate that I had a really stressful week and I'm curious to know what other people do to unwind, or if I tweet out the fact that my tomato plants have a weird moldy looking growth on some of the leaves, and I tweet it out, that has nothing to do with business. But I tweeted about my my sick tomato plant the other day, and I got crazy responses from all over the world. I now have identified what it is. I know the solution, the spray. I know the organic remedy. I know it needs more sun. I like all of these things. It's because I gave them a chance to connect with me as a person. Like I'm
Yeah.
I'm selling consulting services, not gardening services, but some of my most engaged content is around like things like gardening or things like that. So it's this ratio between the two. If you can do it, try to get them 50-50. And if you
Mm.
feel strong enough and after you get more comfortable, then you can end up sharing more personal and less business. So
Yeah.
if you look at your ratio right now, if everything is business, there's a reason why you're not getting engagement. That's because you're just out there crying wolf the whole time.
Yes. And of course, it's also the detail, isn't it, of people's lives. So I put out a post the other day because, sometimes I try and put out post content daily. So I thought, right, what's happened to me? Somebody bought me a bunch of flowers. This is the first time in a long time, and they're actually a really nice bunch of flowers, and they're so pretty. And there's lovely bright yellow and orange sunflowers, and so I thought I'll just put a post out about someone bought me a bunch of flowers, and it's the first time in 5 years that anybody had bought me a bunch of flowers. And I was amazed at the reaction that came back. It was just a little thing, but everybody has a feeling about flowers. And I had some people say, I can't stand flowers. They're better off in the ground, and flowers and all this kind. Then I had other people saying, oh, my husband, he only buys me those awful flowers from the garage that cost £5. And aren't you lucky to have, somebody buying you those nice flowers? And so everybody had their little story around flowers. And I think that that's kind of interesting because they don't necessarily have to be big stories or big vulnerabilities, do they? Or sort of
No,
terrible tragedies or anything like that. It's just letting people into your life sometimes, isn't it?
it absolutely is. And one of the things that I will share, and I don't know how far you are in the book, but we have, let's see, I think it's the Overcoming Fear and Sharing worksheet, where we actually give like examples of things that you can like copy and paste that you can do. And they're little conversation starters that happen. This is also something. Do you have friends that you text with?
Yeah.
Okay. And typically the stuff that you text your friends with, it's not always that important. And sometimes it's not important, but you just want to share it with somebody and then they react and there's this connection. The
Yes.
next time that you think to text a friend something stupid like, oh my God, I just got flowers, or what's going on with my tomato plant, or I can't believe I forgot my coffee in the fridge again or in the microwave again. Think about, instead of texting those to a friend, to sort of post them publicly. And
Yeah.
you don't expect there to be a reaction because it's like, well, why would anybody care about this stuff? But they care
Mhm.
about it because everybody experiences a little version of that throughout their day, and it makes them feel connected.
Yes, yes. So, Ryan, one thing that I'm interested in, because I like to experiment with my profile, and sometimes I've talked about some really very personal stuff. And sometimes I find that those kind of posts, they don't get a lot of reaction. But then I find what happens is people that I talk to, they say, "Oh my God, I saw your post and it really cut through to me, and I really had the same experience." And I'm like, "Well, why didn't you comment on my post then?" So what do you think about the really personal stuff? How personal should you go? Should you have a whinge? Should you have a moan, or should you always be seen as positive? And should you open up about some really difficult things that might have happened to you?
So a cascading yes to what you said, but if you actually group those questions together, I can say yes to it all, because you do
Okay.
want some winces and some moans, and you do want to stay you do want to stay positive. You do want to get deep, and you want to get in front of things that people might hold against you. So I explain this in something I call the invisible like.
Okay.
There are many people who will resonate with your content. And sometimes the more it resonates, the less likely they are to hit it. Because when they hit like or when they hit share, it's them admitting to the world that they also resonate with that story, that they might also have had a past that reflected somewhere that they can connect with you on that. I actually posted on LinkedIn a post about this concept because somebody posted that I've been posting and nobody's liking, nobody's engaging. Why should I even do this? Kind of like a rant about like frustration with posting but not getting a reply. And
Yeah.
so I replied trying to explain the fact that there are tons of people that see your content, but you will never know. And I called it the invisible like. I even
Mm.
go further to talk about your ROI, your invisible return on investment. That's what social media is. But you have to accept that there's going to be a certain amount of time where you won't see the traction or people might not reach out to you, but they're still impacted.
Mhm.
When I posted that, this gentleman named Tommy from the Czech Republic said, "Ryan, you just called me on my ish. I have been following you and your stick figures for the last 3 years, and I read everything I can get, and I watch all of your videos, but I have never hit the like button because I'm intimidated."
Wow.
And that started a conversation. We moved it to a direct message where we even connected further. Last year, he flew into the United States, happened to fly into San Francisco. I happened to be racing sailboats in San Francisco at the same time. I got him onto a sailboat and we sailed in the San Francisco Bay. We made a couple videos, we connected, we became friends. He's like now my go-to guy in the Czech Republic,
Wow.
all because he never liked my things. And so you have to not think of the immediate gratification for anything that you post. You have to
Mhm.
put it out there and know that it's part of your story.
Yes.
For those things that make you wince, for those things that make you really nervous, for those things that are core to who you are today, the
Mhm.
best place to put those isn't in a post, it's in your bio. And
Mm.
I think that when I work with executives or I work with people or they're asking me to work with them, I'll talk with them about their bio. I'll say,
Yeah.
"Can I find your bio online right now?" Or I'll go search for it. And typically the bio looks like this: "I'm a badass. This is awesome. I'm awesome. This is what I did that was awesome. And here's how awesome I am." Like that's the bio. But that's not who you are. And so the people who I want to work with want to share more so that people can get to know them without them knowing that people are getting to know them.
Yes.
I've had people find my content, end up on my website, click on the about page, only to be surprised to basically see a very open look at all the good, the bad, and my version of ugly. And they've reached out to me and said, like, "Wow, like you're so brave for putting that out there, but thank you because I actually have a good idea of who you are." And so if your bio isn't, I don't want to say showcasing, but isn't being honest about these
Mm.
experiences, then you're missing an opportunity for people to get to know you before you even know who they are.
Yeah, I think that's is such an interesting point. And I often think about this because I think that I feel when people are the real them, when they're not holding back, they're just telling it like it is about themselves. I actually experience that as a gift. I think it's an act of generosity, and I think it inspires gratitude.
They go first. If I go first and share what didn't work, then
Yes.
it allows somebody else to own what didn't work in their life, seeing that they can
Mhm.
still continue to take steps forward.
Mm. Yes, whereas when people hold back, I actually experience it as an act of meanness. Or I know sometimes, a lot of the time, it might be because they're shy or because they're nervous or because they're lacking in confidence. But I have to catch myself and say, do you know what? No, they're not being mean. You know, they're not. They're not just trying to do something to you, because of course we always have a tendency to personalize. They probably are just shy, introverted, underconfident. Not everybody is like you, but I don't warm to them in the same way. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I suppose this is really at the heart of it, isn't it, Ryan?
Yeah,
If you
that idea of warming up to somebody is a great way of saying getting to know you. And if
Yes.
you are an entrepreneur, you might have this vision of being on the cover of Forbes magazine, right? Like this is this iconic Forbes magazine. I want to get there. If you actually read the stories of the features of those people who are featured on the cover,
Mhm.
they're asked questions about what went wrong. They're asked questions about how they got through the tough times. They're not
Yeah.
focused on all the good stuff. Like to get on the cover of Forbes magazine, people want to know how you got there, and they know that you didn't get there just from everything being perfect. So don't
Yeah.
forget that those stories actually, I'm reading this book right now, referred by a friend. It's called Story Trumps Structure. Has nothing to do with Trump. Don't worry. This is about writing novels. And Stephen James says the story doesn't start until something goes wrong. And
Ah, yeah.
honestly, that's it. Like your story as an entrepreneur is based on how you overcome the obstacles in front of you. And if you're
Yes.
not sharing it, you're not sharing the full picture.
Yes. Yes. So I think a lot of, I mean, I've interviewed quite a lot of entrepreneurs. So I've interviewed a lot of successful people. And so, of course, they don't mind talking about the failures and the difficulties and the challenges along the way if it's all ended up with them being multimillionaires and having like this
Right,
amazing
right.
life and all the rest of it. That's all fine. But if you're right in the middle of a down, let's say you've had, because life is ups and downs, but if you feel as though you got out the other side yet, you're actually struggling right now. I think a lot of people feel, I don't want to be out there actually saying that. I really don't. I'd rather just really kind of fade away and be a little bit invisible. So what would you say if people are not on an up right now? How can they yeah, how can they really show up as the best and the most interesting versions of themselves?
I think that's a great question. And yes, sometimes the startup culture is like, I can't wait to hurry up and fail so I can talk about it, right? That's not what we're talking about here. And again, you have to look at these as levels, right? Of levels of really extreme things, and then always down to the little silly stupid stuff that happens every day.
Yeah.
Part of the 5 levels that we talk about, level 5 is what not to share. And this is
Yeah.
how I would answer this question. If you are in the middle of something and things are unsettled, or you're in a legal battle, or there's something that's like really intense right now,
Mhm.
pause. Deal with that as a complete story. Because if you share along the way as things are crashing and burning, it's actually
Yeah.
not respectful to your audience.
Mm.
Because a story, when you tell a story, has a beginning, a rising action, a climax, an end, and a resolution. And so for
Mm.
people who are like, oh my God, I'm getting this right now, help, you're not giving the full story. And so it's okay to pause. It's okay to write an angry email at someone and then not send it because maybe it feels good to get some of the emotions out. But don't take to social media and think that ditching the act is just sharing your misery as it happens. But you can journal and document and pay attention to what's happening, how you're feeling, your emotions, and then once you're on the other side of it, you now have how you've gotten through it. I can't stress enough the importance of being strategic when you're sharing. And if you
Mm.
share in the middle of a story, you're going to leave people on like cliffhangers, and they're not necessarily going to know how to help.
Yeah. Well, we've got a lot of questions coming
Yeah, I
through
see
now.
that.
Okay, so Luke says, great interview, very interesting, and agree vulnerability is very powerful. If you just posted vulnerability and things that go wrong every day, people would think you are very negative. So, what percentage of vulnerability should you post amongst positivity? So, this is
Yeah, this
something
is
we.
it. Now, I want to also make sure that people know being vulnerable doesn't mean just sharing bad things that are happening. It's
Okay.
sharing silly, stupid stuff that happens. stuff that
Yeah.
isn't negative, but that is actually like kind of funny, like being late to a meeting, or being in the wrong Zoom something, or like honestly, last night it was my job to redo the bed, so I put new sheets on, and when the pillows that we have and the pillowcases, the pillows are a little big, so you actually have to put two pillowcases on to make sure there's not like an open end. Now, the
Mhm.
first pillow that I put the sheet, the pillowcase on, it's not that bad. But to get the second pillowcase on is like heart surgery, because you have to fold down on one side and you have to like pull the others, and then if you get it wrong and the seams are off, then there's all these riffles and rumples. So like putting on putting on pillowcases and the struggle with it could be a way of being vulnerable, because how many people have also been frustrated when they're putting on cases on pillows? So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all that kind of stuff. I was about to give a keynote in front of hundreds of people in Santa Barbara, huge, massive stage, 3-camera shoot. I was really excited about it. And 30 minutes beforehand, I had a pimple that started to crown on my forehead. And I freaked out. I was like, what the heck do I do about this pimple on my forehead? And everything within me told me to like try to hide it. But I had a friend who encouraged me to share it. And I said, well, I'm going up on stage in 30 minutes in front of hundreds of people and 3 cameras. I've got a crowning pimple on my head. I don't know what to do. And that single tweet, it wasn't negative. It was just a little silly about a pimple on my forehead. The reality is that that single tweet became the most performing, highest viewed, highest shared, highest engaged tweet of the entire conference. And so when it comes to vulnerability, don't think of it as just positive or negative. Think of it as personal and things that make you human, and then things that are more business oriented. So Luke, the real magic is in the combination between personal and business. And if you can get to 50%, that is not easy, but it's good. And then if you can start to share more personal than business, then your business will perform better. Okay. Not all vulnerability is negative. And it looks like we've lost our host, but I'm sure she will come back in, and I'm just going to address some of these other questions. So it looks like somebody said, how honest do you think you should be, and where do you draw the line? Well, that's a great question. And especially right now in a world where there's a lot of things that are uncomfortable to talk about. Things like civil movements, civil rights, things like equality, things that people are impassioned about. And your truth is true for you, and it might be a different truth for someone else. And so when you are looking at sharing, you have to be careful about sharing highly politicized or things that are extremely religious, things that can sort of separate your different groups, and can sort of put you in a light where your truth is being like attacked. And so I think that everyone will have their own comfort level. But in the book, one of the things that I talk about is this cascading baby step ladder. And so get comfortable with sharing level 1, which is just really silly stuff that happens throughout the day. And then level 2 has to do with relationships. Level 3 is maybe, excuse me, things that might be a little bit harder to share. And level 4 are those things that you're frightened to share. So again, like anything, it's a baby step process. One way to test out your stories and get comfortable with it is to share these truths in your bio, because your bio is who you are. And there has been a lot of times where experiences in my life have been frightening to share, but they're in my bio, and that way I can get ahead of them. Well, welcome back. Well, we've just been talking here, been answering some questions.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much for that. I don't know what happened. Obviously, because we're live, sometimes it can be a little bit unreliable. So great. So you've been answering some questions. Have you answered all of the questions?
No, we're actually on to Andy, where he's thanking us for the input, and he's saying, how important do you feel perception is of you rather than actuality? And
Mhm.
I oftentimes ask people straight up, do you have a personal brand? And a lot of times people will say, no, I don't have one. But the reality is Everyone has a personal brand. If you don't think that you do, then you're just not participating in the narrative. Now, my definition of what a personal brand is, it is not just what everybody else thinks about you, and it is not just what you want to be known for.
Mhm.
It's actually the intersection between the two.
Oh.
So the sweet spot, your personal brand, is a combination of what other people can find about you, can imply about you, can sort of make their own intuitive judgment based on the content that they see. And then it's what you put out there, what your taglines are and what your bio says and what you're passionate about. It's the combination where they link up. And in the
Mhm.
book, we have this worksheet called the Rapid Reflection Discovery Process, which is a great place to start your brand because you don't really know where to start. So you ask all of your friends, what do you know me as? Like, if you were to describe me, how do you describe me? You gather that data, and then in a little quiet room with some classical music and maybe some scented candles and dim lighting, you ask yourself, what do I want to be known for? And you start writing them down. I want to be known as somebody who's charismatic. I want to be known as a leader. I want to be known as a speaker. I want to be known as a sailor. And you have an exhaustive list. Then you take the data from your friends
Mhm.
and family and loved ones and coworkers, and then you match it up next to the stuff that you want to be known for.
Nice.
And that's a starting point. Then you choose one quality that is your business, like
Mhm.
your business quality, one that is your personality quality, and
Mhm.
then one that just like is a fun hobby that you enjoy doing. And so that gives you a starting point. And the reason you start there is
Mhm.
because it's easier to convince people of something that they already know, as opposed to coming out and be like, I'm here, this is me. This, no matter what you think, this is me. It's really a two-way street.
Mm. Fascinating. So we've got some more questions. So they're coming through thick and fast. So Lucky saying, how honest do you think we should be and where do you draw the line?
Yeah, so I'd answered this when you were taking your quick momentary break, but
Oh, right.
no,
Okay.
no, no. But the very small answer is everyone has their own levels of comfort, and
Mm.
the idea is to start at the easiest stuff, the
Yeah.
little things that go wrong that are not necessarily negative,
Yeah.
um, the things that make you human, and
Mm.
then that's easy and that is truthful, and then
Mhm.
as you build up, you can get more confident, and the confidence comes when you get the positive comments and people actually start to warm up to you and relate. You're like, oh, that wasn't that bad after all.
So Ryan, let's get on to you being vulnerable about some stuff here. So you've been talking a lot about other people, so let's have it. Tell us a story.
Well, one of the most relevant stories to this conversation, vulnerability, including the idea that you don't necessarily want to share things as they're happening. I'm getting to a point where I'm ready to essentially start sharing a story that has to do with the book that at surface level doesn't seem so great,
Mhm.
and has been very challenging to work through.
Mhm.
But I know that as I look back on it and as I reflect, I'm really proud of how I've handled it.
Okay.
So this book has a co-author. His name is Leonard Kim, and I had been working with him for about 5 years. And this book was about a 3-year journey, and you learn all about him and all about me and all about what we've done together. But writing the book really helped me to come to terms with my own truth and the way that I like to work and the way that I like to work with people.
Mhm.
And I think before the book, there was a number of red flags that I maybe didn't see or I overlooked. And that's a problem that I've had in prior business relationships where
Mhm.
a lot of times they've ended very badly. And I've gotten into some serious legal trouble as a result of some of my business
Mhm.
partners.
Very common.
And you just think that things are going to get better, and you think that it's gonna fix itself, and you just keep going.
Mhm.
And I left Influence Tree December 31st, 2019,
Mhm.
3 months after our book was launched. And
Okay.
I did that because I realized I was not happy in that business relationship.
Mm.
And Leonard has his own challenges and went through some personal struggles, and a lot of that negativity was brought into our relationship.
Mhm.
And for respect for him and for the work that we did, I'm not somebody who's going to be out there saying my business relationship is falling apart. The company that I built for the last 5 years, I'm going to have to walk away from with nothing and start all over again.
Mm.
But that's what happened.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you why I'm okay is
Mhm.
because I've built a personal brand. And
Yes.
your personal brand is an insurance policy
Mm.
against business partners that are the wrong connect, against businesses that fail, against all kinds of things that the economy can hit you with.
Yes.
If for the last 5 years I had said, "Hi, my name is Ryan. Hi, I work at Influence Tree. It's a company that I started. I've got the Influence Tree, Influence Tree." If that's all that I said, and then made it a decision, just like leaving a marriage is not an easy thing to do, but
Mm.
I had to make the right decision, which was truthful for myself. And there was a lot of drama that went on, and I didn't publicly share any of it because it's not anybody's business.
Mm.
But I'm that much more experienced about my emotions, about how I handled the situation, about looking back on it and feeling like I can have my head high.
Yes.
There's still a few things that are not settled, and that's very unsettling. And if I look at the worst days over the last 6 months, they've had to do with working out leaving this company.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
here's a book that I'm excited about, my life story, and how I found branding and success in being vulnerable. Yet going through this process, I didn't feel like it was time for me to share it.
Mm.
And so I've dripped a little bit here and a little bit there. But imagine writing a book for 3 years, it being published, and
Yeah.
then making a decision to leave your company with nothing, just walk away because you just want it to be just walk away. It's not worth it. And so that's exactly what happened. So I have a book that I'm still proud of, but I feel like I'm co-parenting with somebody who I used to have a good relationship with.
Oh,
So
well,
that's and again, like I'm fearful of people judging me. Like, how can you have a book that you write with somebody but still not work with them? Well, how much time you got? I can explain the logic behind it, right? But I don't know. There
yeah.
you go.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your honesty there. And do you know what? It's funny because I think we all have this tendency to personalize and think that other people are going to judge us. But the only thing that was going through my mind when you said that was, oh my God, I've had business fallouts as well. So have most people. This is just a familiar story. If you're an entrepreneur and you're in business, it often doesn't go well. And in fact, more often than not, it does all fall apart and people end up walking away. And just like in a marriage, sometimes you get the right business partner, they're a great fit, and the marriage or the partnership lasts, but it's really no different. And people change and their priorities change. And I often say to people that, you've got to look at the people who are alongside that person. It's not just them. Sometimes there's somebody else or other people that are exerting an influence that is going to have an impact on your life. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's outside of
I
your
can't
control.
control it. I wish I could, and I tried so
Mm,
hard to, and
mm,
but I first of all, I'm thankful that you didn't initially like jump to all of my fears that you and everybody else would jump to. And that's exactly what we talked about. Like, I feel like I'm already a ginger, but I'm like getting all red. Like, I feel all the blood rushing to my face because I'm just like in that moment. But this is not the first business relationship that has failed. But I feel like I did better this time because I got out before it was too late for myself. I've been
yeah.
stuck too long. So I look back on it and I'm like proud of myself, and I'm happy, and I'm moving forward in a positive direction, but with that huge like drag of all this weight. And I feel like I just thrown a little bit of it off there, and thank you for not judging me.
Oh, no, I mean, honestly, as I said, just by saying that, you will have brought a lot of value to our viewers and listeners. And they will be thinking, I've been through that. I've been through those challenging times. Because even if it's not a business partner, even if it's just somebody that you've worked with, a co-worker or anybody, we all have these experiences. It's almost universal. that at some point in our lives, we will find ourselves, unfortunately, having to have a lot to do with somebody that we don't really like anymore and we don't see eye to eye with. And as I said, it certainly happened to me. And I've got a little story that I can share. If my little story of vulnerability about that one.
Please do. It might make me feel better.
Why not?
Might make the blood rush from my face back down to my heart.
Let's get authentic. Okay, so when I was in my brand identity business, it wasn't my business initially. It belonged to somebody else. And there were two of them. It was a partnership, and they'd had a big falling out. And one of the partners, the one that had left, had gone off to the US. He'd actually gone to work in New York. So the remaining partner brought me in and said, I want you to be MD, and I want you to, build this company up, and I want to sell it. That's what I really like. So there's a bit of toing and froing about, do you want to get investment? If we get investment in, then we can grow it, we can still keep it. No. He decided eventually, after we messed around with it, I want to sell it. Okay, your job is to get the profits up, get the revenues up, and then, make me a multimillionaire. That's but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it worth your while. So I'm going to give you shares. You're going to get a pretty good salary. I'm going to give you a profit share, and I'm going to give you shares. And, when I cash out, then you can cash out too. Thought, great, this sounds good. So anyway, we used to have to fly around the world together. So we were in all these different European capitals and the US, and also, I was always with him, and which became quite tiresome. But anyway, when we were on one of these trips, and I still remember it, we were actually in Prague. I got a letter from my lawyers because he'd been dragging his heels about this contract. But he'd finally got his act together. And I said, well, I'll just hand it over to my lawyers as well, because I didn't fully trust him. And they phoned me up and they said, Jane, this contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. There are all these little sneaky little clauses, that basically mean that you will get nothing, absolutely nothing. And I remember I was really cross. So we were drinking and we had like a few drinks, and we ended up having this huge argument in Prague, in this hotel, about him trying to rip me off, which he was doing. I'd actually rumbled him. And it all had a happy ending in a way, because I did get it fixed and I did walk away and I did cash in, and, that was all wonderful. But from that point on, we were enemies. Can you imagine? I had to fly around the world with him until we actually sold the business, and we had to pretend to be friends and business, colleagues, because we knew it was going to happen. And if we didn't stay in it together, then we wouldn't have made any money. So that's my little story, Brian.
There's a number of things in there that resonate, and it makes me think to a different story of contracts that I've found small wording in that I didn't know, and it's made me that much more diligent about contracts. It's like, these are the things that we're not proud of, but in retrospect, not in the moment, but in retrospect, they're stories that we can learn from. And I think that you mentioned two words. One was that, like, these are universal things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talked about how we personalize it. And I think that's really the core.
Yes.
When we look at it from the outside, we're like, oh yeah, it's universal. Yeah, we all fail. Yeah, we all have challenges in relationships. But when it's you sharing that, you're like, oh my God, no, this is just me. Everybody's going to judge me. Like my fear is that my credibility will be lessened by being associated with a co-author. And I have to realize, as you're helping me realize by sharing it, that it is not just the personal. Look at it as a universal. And so maybe what I'm going through could be the genesis for another book about business partners. And then you get excited and you go on a different path. So yeah, thanks for sharing. And honestly, I feel better having shared it.
That's the power of being authentic and actually telling it like it is, isn't it, Ryan?
Yeah.
Because that is when the magic happens, because that's when you're giving a gift to someone. I really feel it in that way, that you opening up to me gave me permission to open up to you. And then, you know, of course, we're doing it in front of lots of other people who are probably, what are they talking
Sorry,
about?
forgot everybody else was here. I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, this is just like
we're
a
just kind of sitting
therapy
there
session.
having a nice chat, really, aren't we? But yeah, it's the magic. It's where the magic happens, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a powerful thing, and it's, for me, it's kind of an inception, because I've been able to. I only started getting success and traction with my brand when I started to be myself. Yet it still is hard to share some of these things because it's undeniably personal. But
Yes.
I think that yeah, I'll probably go back and watch this just to just to experience it again for myself. But yeah, hopefully, as I get more comfortable sharing the story and the lessons, it will help other entrepreneurs who are maybe with partners that it might not be the right fix. It might not be the right, and so letting them know it's okay. There is life after that. And if you build a personal brand and you put yourself in front, I've always been pushing people to my website, and then off of my website, it goes somewhere else. So all the content is still evergreen. All of my interviews, it still works. Where do you find me? It's at my website. So for those people and entrepreneurs who might be in a relationship, might be fearful of where it might end up, or just know that this is a universal experience, the more you focus on personalizing your own brand, then the more you protect yourself from falling into the trap, which is not sharing.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, I have so much anger and frustration about this, and I feel that if I don't share, it's just going to swell up, and it's going to come out in a bad area somewhere else. It's gonna pop.
Yes, and of course, I often say this to some of the male entrepreneurs that I work with, or I know, that as women, it's a lot easier for us. We have permission because we've grown up. Nobody has ever told us, oh, you have to be strong. You know, you have to be a man. No, I mean, people don't say that. They know that we women, you know, we always talk to each other, and that's one of the greatest things that we like doing, is just being able to kind of have a good gossip, you know, with other women. But guys tend to rely on women to open up to, and so it is a release and a relief of pressure. When you
Yeah,
do that, you should not have to keep those things to yourself. You need to be able to talk about them, because that's how you become mentally healthy. It's really
absolutely.
critical.
Absolutely. And if you're not convinced with any of the other benefits of growing a business and driving trust and loyalty, it just feels better. And if you have this different act, if you're putting on an act in front of your friends, and you're putting on an act in front of your boss, and then you're on a live stream, you're like, okay, here I am, I'm on my act, then it becomes like there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of stress around managing these different personalities. But I feel like I've never been more myself, and I've never been happier, even with these ups and downs. And I attribute it to being going in the direction of in which I'm scared, which we started with the very beginning. And
Yes.
I think in the UK, we're not talking about dropping your worst failures out there. It's about understanding the value of being a little bit vulnerable, and that comes from just admitting that you're human.
Yeah.
Like this, being okay with a spelling error. Like, it's not all one extreme or the other. And when you find that balance between personal and business, as an entrepreneur, I am my business. My business is my person.
Mm,
And those people that are drawn to that, those are the people that I want to work with, because not everyone will like you, and
true.
not everyone is your client. So
Yeah,
the more you are yourself, the more you actually filter through the people that are more likely to work with you.
that's right. And also, I think the knock-on effect is that you're going to have a lot more fun, because you know, you don't want to be working with people that are half-hearted about working with you. You want to be working with people who love it because they love you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
makes
There you go.
sense. Yeah.
So if you love this, Ginger, if you want to figure out how I can help you to uncover what doesn't go wrong and position it as a way to link your expertise with your experience, then Hey, there you go. You got an invitation. You know all about me now.
Fabulous. So just before you go, Ryan, we've got Luke saying, can you put a link to the book and any worksheets? We'll do that. Lucky says, will be great to get the book and worksheets also. So here's the book again. I'll just hold it up. So it's Ditch the Act.
Yep. And you can just go to ditchtheact.com. That's a really easy way. You can go to my website. You can find me. It's a very difficult URL. Okay. Ryan.online.
Okay.
That's it. So just type in your browser, ryan.online. You can link out to the book. And I do have a newsletter that goes out every Thursday. It's called 3 Things from Ryan Foland. I give you something to listen to, something to watch, and something to see.
Fabulous. Well, why don't we get the link to that, and we'll put that below the live stream.
Absolutely. Done deal.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you so much. I know it's not the evening over there. It's lunchtime for you in LA, isn't it? So
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm energized now. Like I'm going to go back and watch this and just like watch myself struggle through that and feel and experience it. You know, I'm here, but I also want to watch this. I feel like it'll help.
What an amazing conversation we've had tonight. Thank you so much for joining me, Ryan. And I know that you've created a lot of value for our guests as well. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I hopefully will fly over the pond one of these days so we can, have some, what is it? Some tea and crumpets?
Fish and chips, Marmite on toast, baked beans.
All the above. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening in.
All right, then. Bye for now.